Just after dawn on a hot day in August 1944, Roy Ridgway waited in the hold of a ship that had carried him across the Mediterranean. As the vessel lay off the town of Fréjus on the southern coast of France, halfway between Saint-Tropez and Cannes, Roy listened to the rhythm of the waves and rumble of explosions in the distance. For the past week, more than 100,000, mainly French and American troops, backed by over 3,000 planes, had poured over the beaches up and down the Riviera, forcing the German military into retreat, as Operation Dragoon opened up a new front in southwestern Europe. But the Germans were well dug in around Fréjus, and their coastal guns were firing salvo after salvo as the Allies called in their B-24 bombers. Roy was part of a mobile medical unit attached to the 1st French Army, but as the Allied troops battled their way inland, his supply truck was stuck deep inside the ship, and he was forced to stay on board as the temperature rose, anticipating incoming fire at any moment. He was one of the last men to reach French soil that day, eventually driving onto the sand with the smell of smoke and diesel hanging in the sea breeze. Over the following weeks, Roy and his ambulance unit made their way north through the Rhône Valley and onwards into newly liberated France, greeted with smiling faces and glasses of wine nearly everywhere they stopped. There was much to celebrate as the end of the war was in sight. It would be no simple victory march, though, and there would still be several more months of fighting to come. A shortage of food in the villages meant the newly arrived troops often felt compelled to give away their supplies to hungry people. In the medieval town of Dijon, near where the Wehrmacht had recently attempted to draw a defensive line, Roy was taken to a hospital morgue where a Frenchman proudly showed him 6 dead Germans, declaring, "I killed them myself, and tonight I'm going to kill a woman who was a collaborator." The bitter remnants of war were everywhere. For the next 6 months, Roy moved around France as the last German pockets were captured or flushed out. The young man's uniform became a rag bag of bits and pieces picked up along the way, a German belt, an American jacket and British trousers, making it hard for other people to place him. What they would almost certainly not have guessed was that Roy Ridgway had started the war as a pacifist and conscientious objector. How had this 27-year-old former clerk from Liverpool ended up working alongside the French army in the liberation of Europe? The answer is a story of deep convictions and doubts, taking us through love affairs, family arguments, and time in prison, as well as fighting in Syria, Italy, and France. Battles of Conscience is the story of Roy and the other 60,000 British citizens who refused to take up arms during the Second World War. From 1939 to 1945, the people of Britain were mobilised to fight on a scale not seen before or since, as young and old, male and female, rich and poor were expected to make sacrifices for God, king and country, as well as for friends, family and neighbours, if not for wider humanity. Alongside the millions in the armed forces, everything from mining to market gardening was organised around the needs of the war effort, as the nation faced up to the Nazi threat. But tens of thousands of people declined the call, influenced by a deep religious faith, hopes for socialist revolution, or an intense objection to suffering. Although often profoundly opposed to fascism and other forms of totalitarianism, they were convinced that force could never be the answer to violence. Some were unwilling to make any compromise and spent months behind bars, firm in their absolute convictions. Many more worked as farmers and foresters on the home front, or as ambulance crew and in bomb disposal units near the front lines, as they tried to help others but stopped short of carrying guns. They could be found across the world, volunteering for medical experiments in Britain, driving supplies across the mountains in China, tending to the wounded in the Middle East, or among the soldiers in the liberation of France. Although opposed to war, they went everywhere that battles were fought. Popular memory seems to find it hard to place the people who refused to fight in the good war against fascism, a war seen as not only just but necessary.